Hey everyone, it's Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. We are your source for small ruminant health and wellness, and today we are talking about corn. Now, some of you do feed corn to your animals, others do not, and there is a lot of information out there. Some of it is good and some of it is bad. So we want to take a moment today to walk you through feeding corn to your sheep and goats. Now, there's three different types of corn that you are generally going to be feeding to your sheep and goats. That could be whole shell corn, where it's the whole kernel. It could be cracked corn, where it's broken down into little parts, and then it could be rolled corn. And rolled corn is a little bit different. It's kind of flat like a pancake, and it's kind of been squished by a rolling mill. I want to talk to you about each different type of corn, what the benefits are and what the negatives are. But before we get into that, we need to talk about some of the information that is out there about corn that you need to know. First and foremost is corn is a grain. Some of us think of corn as a vegetable, and that immature sweet corn that we eat as humans is in fact considered a vegetable, but for all intents and purposes, it is in fact a grain. Corn is in a grass family, similar to oats, wheat, barley, things like that. So when you think of corn, think of it as a grain. When you hear people refer to corn as a grain, they are in fact correct. So what are the problems with corn? There are about four main problems. The first main problem with corn is that it's not very high in protein. In fact, corn only has about 7% crude protein, but it does have a lot of energy. This energy is in the form of starches. So we have to be cautious if we feed too much corn to animals too fast, because those starches can cause a lot of problems with potential bloat, Clostridium, and other problems. Corn also has a very skewed calcium and phosphorus ratio. So if you've watched any of our videos talking about urinary calculi, you know that the calcium phosphorus ratio in an animal's complete diet is very important in preventing urinary calculi in our males, especially in our juvenile males, and even more especially in our castrated juvenile males. The problem with the calcium phosphorus ratio is it has way more phosphorus than it does calcium. Ideally, we want to see a calcium phosphorus ratio of about 1.5 to 2 parts calcium to 1 part phosphorus. So you are indeed going to have to mix corn with something else to meet that calcium phosphorus window. Then we move into some of the outliers as far as corn is concerned, and that would be nitrates and mycotoxins. Nitrates in and of themselves can form a problem in corn if the corn has been harvested during a period of stress, such as drought that can cause high nitrates and can in fact cause nitrate poisoning in the animals. The other is mycotoxins. Mycotoxins form in corn when corn is stored incorrectly. It gets mold on it, and this mold can get these mycotoxins, which can in fact poison your animals. So when you go to the feed store, you may see bagged corn that says things like deer corn, and that deer corn essentially is going to be a lot cheaper, and that's because it has not probably been tested for things like nitrates and mycotoxins. So it is important to remember that when you do buy it, that you get it from a reliable source. Now, if you're going to be buying directly from a farm like we do here at Linessa Farms, you may want to get that corn tested for nitrates and mycotoxins prior to feeding it to your animals. So let's talk about the different types of corn that you can encounter and that you can feed and the problems associated with them. When it comes to whole shell hard corn, that is the most common and the cheapest option that you are going to have. What are the problems with this? Well, the problems are that it is not as easily digestible for the sheep and goats. Now, cattle, completely different story. They can digest it a little bit easier, but when it comes to sheep and goats, they can't digest it. They can't get into that starch as well. And essentially, they're going to be pooping out some of that nutritional value. The other thing that we like to consider when it comes to hard shell corn is that it can be very hard on their teeth, especially for our older sheep and goats, which may have some aged teeth that could break possibly easily. And we want to make sure that we take that into consideration as well. Now, when it comes to cracked corn is dry hard shell corn that is either ran through a grinder or ran through a roller mill. Here at Linessa Farms, we have a roller mill, but we also have a grinder that we used before we got the roller mill. either one is an option for you. If you're looking at the best bang for your buck, you're probably going to want to go with some type of grinder that you can find online at places like Amazon. I know Premier has some nice versions available as well. So what is the problem when it comes to cracked corn? Well, the problem when it comes to cracked corn is that cracked corn opens it up and allows that starch to be very easily digested, and it allows it to be digested very, very quickly. That can be a problem. If you introduce too much cracked corn to an animal too fast, we can run into issues like acidosis, which is where the pH of their rumen drops too fast. We can run into issues such as bloat, and we can also run into potential issues such as Clostridium. If you're going to be feeding any type of grain products to your animals, or if you're going to have grain products out where they have access to it, we want to make sure that all of the animals on your farm are properly vaccinated against Clostridium type C and D. All it takes is one time for them to get loose, overeat on grain, and they can most definitely be affected by Clostridium type C and D. So very important for you to keep in mind. The other thing that you need to consider about cracked corn and rolled corn is that they are generally going to be more expensive because there's more labor involved in the process of producing them. So what exactly is rolled corn? Well, rolled corn is the most expensive, and that is because it must be steamed first and then ran through a rolling mill. It is probably the most beneficial for them as far as nutrition is concerned because they can really get to everything really, really easily, and it is far more palatable than whole shell corn or cracked corn. Although I will say that the rolled corn is going to have the same nutritional problems as your cracked corn. So when it comes to corn, remember, it can be a very valuable part of your animal's overall nutrition and diet, but you have to approach it from a scientific angle, and you have to look at it for what it is and what it isn't, and take the necessary precautions to ensure that you don't cause any dietary issues with your sheep and goats. I'm Tim from Linessa Farms, specialty in heirloom livestock. Thanks for joining us again today, and I look forward to seeing all of you again next time.